We're going to look at 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 15 through 18. Because I was sure of this is Paul speaking to the Corinthians. So because I was sure of this, I wanted to come to you first so that you might have a second experience of grace, or it's translated to blessing, so another blessing. I wanted to visit you on my way to Macedonia and come back to you from Macedonia and have you send me on my way to Judea. Was I facilitating or being fickle or going back and forth and undecisive when I wanted this? Do I make my plans according to the flesh, ready to say yes, yes, and no, no at the same time? As surely as God is faithful, our word to you has not been yes and no. So it goes on to say that in Jesus Christ, that they proclaimed all of his promises are yes, because he is the faithful one, right? He doesn't go back and forth. He's not indecisive. So Paul was telling them that he was not making promises based off of human standards, based off the human flesh standards, right? But based off of God's standards. And so I'm going to approach this a couple of ways, so there'll be two parts to this. But the first way I'm going to approach this is, as humans, we tend not to follow through with our promises. Whether it's a circumstantial change, like something around us that we can't help changes, or we change our minds based off of how we physically feel, how we emotionally feel, whatever the case may be, we go based off of our feelings. And sometimes those feelings can be circumstances that can't be changed, right? Like if you experience the death of a loved one, then maybe you do need to step back and not follow through with a certain promise in order to grieve properly, right? That's a feeling, but it's something that you need to do for yourself. Or if you seriously get injured, say you promise to run a marathon and you injure your foot, that's a circumstance where you're going to have to back out and break that promise because of a personal circumstance. But in this, it's saying that God is always faithful to follow through with no wavering. And the concept I'm going to be talking about today doesn't have to do with the ones that you cannot change, the circumstances you cannot change or you cannot push through, but rather the ones where we have the choice and we choose not to follow through. Say you said that you're going to go out with a friend and suddenly you decided not to go through, but you promised you'd be there for them. You promised you'd be there to support them and something, and you go, I'm just kind of not feeling like it today, so I'm going to tell them something came up. That's the kind of circumstance. You had a choice whether to follow through with your promise or not, right? And that's where I talk about feelings. That's where I'm talking about it. This is a concept that I've been working on for myself personally for the last couple of years. God put it down deep in my heart that when I make a promise, I need to follow through with it to the best of my ability. And it always doesn't happen. It's difficult to always follow through, but I have learned that I need to do my best. But putting in the effort changes things. So if you make a promise to God, if you make a promise to man, make it a priority to follow through with that promise unless there's something that hinders you. It is in one of my most recent videos, I spoke of a church that was under heavy witchcraft. And God gave me scriptures to speak to them concerning it. And I promised God I would do this. I had promised him that I would do something like this. And I had it written down and prepared. Like I had set my heart and my mind on doing what he had asked me to do. When it came time to do it, I legitimately was stepping forward to do it. But this is an area where I had a small hindrance, right? It didn't entirely hinder me from doing something about it. I just couldn't do it to the way I had planned. And it was because in the moment, there's so much evil and so much pride. There was like a block. When pride steps into the picture, it literally puts a block up for God. I have experienced that in many different ways, whether it's in my own life or whether it's God speaking through me to someone else. I can sense that pride literally puts a block up for God to be able to work. So I wasn't able to get out the scriptures and say it the way that God had kind of prepared me to do, but I still put an effort forth to do something, and God used that. God used the best he could. And so one of the questions that came out that I hadn't expected or prepared for was, this guy was teaching obedience, or teaching that you should be obedient to God, but not teaching how to be obedient to God, and then condemning his congregation, going, "You're not obedient to God. I can see the demons on your face and it makes me not even want to talk to you. I can't even talk to you." And it was just condemnation. There was no teaching and guidance and grace and mercy, right? I mean, it was literally a move of the enemy on how it was done. But when I went face to face with him, and I presented that question, it was, so why don't you teach them to obey, right? Why are you lulling them to sleep, putting them in a weak position, and then condemning them? And that was something that I hadn't thought of, that I believe God brought up in the moment to put a question within one of their heads so that they second question what's going on in that church. But I still put forth the effort. I tried, and God was able to use it. And I had difficulty at first within myself about it. I was like really struggling. I'm like, God, I was not able to do it the way that I wasn't able to get the scriptures out. It's very important for me to usually pair it with scriptures. I have to. It's extremely important. But God didn't condemn me in this moment. Instead, he showed me that he was still able to use it, and my heart was towards putting forth that effort and keeping my promise to him. And I know one day I'll grow stronger in it, because, in our learning, we do fail. We don't do great, but we grow stronger the more we practice, right? So in any promise you make, there will be distractions and there will be other things that come up. But you need to set your mind and your heart on the task to get it done. And in the best of your ability, right? To the best of your ability, set your mind on that to do the best you can. God is faithful to fulfill his promises, and we are to strive to have his characters in all parts of our life. It tells us in the Bible, and whatever you do, do to the glory of God. So that's not only within the kingdom and body of Christ, but that's in your own job. That's in your life. So when you're doing this, when you're fulfilling your promises to other people, even within certain circumstances, that's to the glory of God. That's to God's character. You're striving to be like God, because it's not just within the kingdom and his promises within the kingdom that he's keeping these promises faithful. It's in every situation, and we need to be there as well. If you don't feel like you can fulfill it, then just don't make the promise to begin with. You can say something in a way where you're not promising, like, I will try to get it done, but I can't promise anything. I will just make an effort, right? Like, I'll make an effort to get it done, but I can't promise that I will actually get it done. And just be upfront and forward on to the person on whether you can get it done or not. And beware of vague promises, because you'll still be held to it. I'll try to fit this in as quickly as possible, but one time God asked me to do, so when I first started walking with God, I told him, I'll do whatever you want. I promise I'll do whatever you want, right? 2 years later, he asked me to do something, and I had learned the importance of keeping your promises and your vows, but I had forgotten what I had said back then. And when he was asking me to do something, I said, but God, I haven't promised you. I haven't promised you yet, because it was something I was having a hard time doing, having a hard time letting go of. And he goes, actually, and he took me back to that moment when I was on my knees in my room years before, going, I'll do whatever you want. And he held me to it. So from now on, whatever he wants, I do, because that was a promise that I made to him. And yes, I stumble and I fall, and he has grace and mercy on it. But we got to be aware of vague promises as well, because you will still be held accountable for it. Go on to part 2.